Welcome to SHOWstudio. My name is Willy Ndatira. I'm a consulting editor at Fantastic Men, a creative director with the brand Jordan Luca, and generally a consulting creative with multiple brands. And I'm going to let the rest of my panel introduce themselves. And we'll start with Ayo.
Hi, so I'm Ayo Ojo. I'm a fashion journalism student at Central St. Martin's, and I'm also the founder of the Fashion Archive.
Hanna?
Hi, I'm Hanna Hanra. I'm a writer. I write about culture. I publish a music magazine and consult to brands on how words affect and will help grow their world.
I'm Gabriel Moses. I'm a director and photographer from South London.
And Jamie, lastly.
Jamie Reid. I'm a creative director and graphic designer working between book design, fashion campaign work and editorial.
Okay, so my first question is, do visionaries have a place in the world that's very much about the now and giving the customer what they want, not what they need, or looking forward? Do you guys find vision, working with the future in mind, has a space for now?
I think definitely. I mean, it would be a pretty disappointing world if there was no place for people like that. And I think perhaps like the landscape has changed for sure, but at the same time, there are different types of, platforms and ways to achieve that. And there's also the argument that you don't need to maybe climb through like a hierarchy in the same way, like everyone has access to, obviously Instagram and things like that, but it can be a portfolio. So you can reach out to people and you can get in contact and you can like show people what you do, or people might, vice versa, might recognize what you do. So I definitely think that there is, scope to still have that. And there are people still doing that, whether they're like music, fashion, photography, art, all of these things. It's just probably a very different way of thinking about it now.
I guess it is. Yeah, I hear your point. It's the difference between what is popular, maybe, and then who else is doing something which is forward-thinking, and and they're still doing it, and it's just a question of platforming that, or finding them and working with them, or creating space, or even rewarding them financially. Because I think sometimes visionaries do suffer financially because it's obviously not the product that is easy to consume. You're sort of creating something that's a bit more challenging, which then puts you in a different position than everybody else who's sort of making what the customer wants.
I think Damna Vasalia is a visionary in many different ways, in the fact that he gets us to think about certain things in very interesting ways, and he uses his work as a commentary on many other things that are going on in the present moment. I also, when you say visionary, I more look towards like the older designers. Like I'm talking the Schiaparellis and the Poirets and stuff. I can't really see current designers as visionaries so much, because a lot of them are still building their fashion world, and a lot of them don't have a big enough body of work. So if you look at the creative directors of current big brands, but when we look at like Japanese designers like the Jun Takahashis, the Yohji Yamamoto, the Reiko Kubas, I'd say those are the visionaries. These are people that have designed what they want to design and convince people to like it, as opposed to the other way around, where a lot of designers, they look at trend forecasts and they try to guess or try to predict what other people like.
It's the whole thing of you giving people what they want instead of what they need, or or even paving the way for the future. To me, Y3 is super influential, not just in terms of design, as in, for sneaker culture, for the business model, which is followed by a lot of young designers like Saul Nash, Nazir Mazar. Where else do you guys see the influence of Y3 in terms of the idea of the brand and the idea of that collaboration?
I think it's widespread across the industry. Like you mentioned some brands, I think of brands like Kotweiler as well, who sort of merge sportswear, streetwear, and then elements of high fashion. I think the influence of Y3 is so widespread, even in sports communities, from the football community with their work with Real Madrid to basketball because of some of the sneakers that they've made.
It's probably the first brand, Y3 as itself, that brought technical fabrics into fashion, rather than perhaps like you had like nylon and things in the 90s, but I think it was the first place where it was like, oh, this is high fashion, but it's sporty as well. It's technical. Adidas always had such a strong toehold, excuse the pun, in music. All those like early noughties musicians, at that moment in time when music was shifting huge numbers and videos were so important, it was always an Adidas shoe. It was always an Adidas track pant.
It's one of the quotes that I had in my notes with Yoji. It's the fact that after, I think, he started his own business in 1977, and then Y3 started in 2002, so just under 30 years. For him, he was really intrigued by the presence of the three stripes on the streets. So he said he wanted to be there. He wanted to kind of connect with that immense presence that Adidas has in terms of culture and just the everyday people on the streets.
Yeah, he said that the kids on the street weren't taking their Adidas trainers off even when they went to bed, was his thing. And I guess it's true. I mean, although I hope they wouldn't wear dirty shoes in bed because that would be gross. But, you know, sportswear suddenly did become this everyday thing that everyone wore all the time, rather than like your shoes.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true. For you guys, what was the influence? I mean, when were you aware of Y3?
For me, it was like growing up, I wasn't like too into fashion, but I was always like this like football crazy kid. And like seeing the relationship between Yoji and Zidane was like my first time kind of seeing those two worlds kind of like cross over. And like to see like him walk for Y3 and the campaigns and stuff like that, like it was super interesting. So that was like my first kind of experience, like being like.
So it was through sports.
Yeah, it was, and then like the Madrid collaboration and things like that. Like that was my like first introduction.
Similarly, I think just like growing up as a kid and like when you start sort of dressing yourself and shopping and things like that, I became aware first of Adidas, obviously, like you know, from being a teenager. Then kind of at university and things like that, maybe dipping a bit more into the fashion side of things too. And then you start to look into who those really influential big designers are. And then Y3 kind of like felt like that really interesting middle point that felt maybe like it spoke to me, at least at the time, a little bit more then.
So at that point, when you were studying, fashion wasn't really on your radar when you were
more so like the imagery that was associated to fashion. As I studied in graphic design, so I was very much looking at that first, but finding the Yoji imagery only through looking into Peter Saville and Ascoli, Nick Knight, and finding it, I've very much found it that way, design and imagery first before the clothing.
When you look at the connection between music and fashion, now we've entered the age of social media, it's a different connection than, you know, music and fashion, that relationship, is it still ongoing? Do you still find that it's...
Oh yeah, more than ever. I think if we cast our gaze back to 20 years ago, first of all, the music landscape was very different. It was four boys in a band with a guitar and a drum, or it was like UK garage. You know, there wasn't like indie. It was,
which is coming back.
There wasn't this. Let's not go there. That's a whole other panel. You know, it wasn't this sort of liberated, anyone can do anything and be anything scene that we have now. It wasn't as broad-minded. I think that is reflected in the way that people dress. You know, and I think brands are so sort of 15, 20 years ago, they would like do something to support new bands. Whereas now it's way more just like, here's some money and some clothes.
It's a fair point. It shouldn't just stop at red carpets. Maybe, you know, and editorials. Maybe brands need to kind of think how to work with music artists.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like the support that there is now is as enriching as it once was.
Yeah.
You know, it was much more like, we're going to create a platform, and now it's like, just have this money.
Yeah.
Get some. You've got a lot of followers. Get some likes.
It's true.
Tag us on the gram. You know, it's a lot more transactional now.
Yeah. Y3, when it started, I remember I was in high school, and I was already interested in buying fashion magazines, and it was really groundbreaking that, you know, mixing sports and high fashion, because those were two different worlds. Like Lagerfeld would be like, tracksuits are for depressed people.
But putting it on the runway as well. Putting it on the runway.
And put it on the runway.
You know, it was so disruptive at the time.
It was crazy. It was on French TV. So it was a bit of a shock to their system. I feel that we get stuck in this revival system, and I think Hannah's reaction was when I mentioned indie and the whole indie sleaze thing that's coming back. We seem to be stuck in this kind of like using nostalgia not just as, you know, it's the past. It's literally a tool for people to, you know, have a safer way of expressing themselves, of designing products. It's like I look at, oh well, we're in 2020. Let me bring back whatever was relevant in the 2000s or the late 90s, etc. So, you know, it's revivals as a business system or as you know, a safe value, as they would call it, with corporate. You can see it with shows being sequels.
I mean, that's always been the way, though. That's not, you know, in the mid-90s when I was a teenager, the trends were all based on this like 60s sort of hyper-colored, cutesy little like feminine things. You know, music videos were all, there was like lots of spaceships and UFOs and like kitsch
delight
colors and, you know, floral shapes. And that was looking back 20 years, 25 years.
Yeah.
And again, you know, history repeats itself. We're looking back 20, 25 years. It's easy to goldenize the past.
Yeah.
The 90s weren't that great, but they had their moments.
Yeah.
And I think people feel safe looking backwards, whereas like, what is there to look forward to? Like we're told every day that the world's on fire. 20 years ago, people didn't practice sport in the same way that they all do now. Like everyone I know goes to the gym, and I'm sure everyone that you all know does some kind of physical activity, whether that be Pilates or, I don't know, parkour. Whereas like in 2004, nobody worked out.
No.
Like nobody had self-care. Like if you wanted to go to the gym, you might like dig out an old grey tracksuit, but it wasn't such a cultural thing, and it certainly wasn't something that people did gladly. So having this weird sportswear that was fashion was kind of like this new cool thing. Where and you said earlier, you know, like depressed people in tracksuits. I didn't own a tracksuit or a pair of trainers, and this is no word of a lie, until 2011. I wore heels and trousers. Yeah. And now I only wear trainers. And I have quite a few tracksuits.
So I think growing up, it was definitely one thing, the affordability. That's what we could afford. And also as kids, you wanted to feel a part of something. So you wanted to wear that tracksuit, that Adidas tracksuit that all your friends had and all of those kind of things. So I think growing up, that was always just the thing. And the comfortability side of it as well.
I'm sure if you like football too, like boots and things like that is massive, right? Like new boots and like player associations and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. You'd see like your idols kind of wearing these tracksuits. Or a big thing for me was like wearing like the training kits of a team or things like that. So like, that was a big thing like in my area and around the people that we grew up
still wearing it?
To this day, it's still part of my wardrobe. So I've never grown out of that. So yeah.
It's good. Which is again the whole cultural relevance and how, you know, a brand can connect with different segments of society by you know, the way he designed. I mean, my favorite thing, which I'm still trying to get, is the Real Madrid 2014 It's the black on black print with the dragon and everything else. That was brilliant. Next topic for me is, it's a quote from Thorsten Veblen, who's a sociologist. And he says, the price of a luxury good isn't determined by its function, but its desirability. What do you think is desirable today?
Maybe what interests me, I hope, is the work that I make, and through desirability, I would hope that I'm trying to create work that I do desire in some kind of sense, or on some level. I don't know, creating work that strives to be memorable, or at least I feel like I'm present in it, or I'm behind, or I'm kind of lucky in my field. I get to collaborate with a lot of different people, and it's about kind of bringing teams together and collective vision and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe not directly what I sort of desire as an object, but it's kind of what I'm interested in.
In your photography, is it something that comes up, the idea of desirability?
Do you know what? For me personally, it's not really been too much of a thing, because from young, I've always tried to push an aesthetic that, especially around my age group and things like that, wasn't the big thing. I have a very kind of simplistic style, just trying to create a simple, beautiful image. And for me, it wasn't widely desirable as I was kind of coming through. But my thing always was, I almost wanted to change the way in which my community saw things. And it took me to be stubborn in order to be I like this. If you enjoy it too, amazing. If not, then that's okay as well. And for me, it was always kind of creating an audience who just appreciated that style of photography and film as well. And yeah, that's always kind of been my thing. I feel like you need people to have that kind of attitude in order to kind of push things forward. So yeah.
To educate, it's again just, showing a different point of view and having the courage to stand out by, doing work which you feel strongly about, as opposed to just, this is what people want or they're going to get, so that's what I'm going to do.
Especially because people's taste in things and opinions change all the time. So it's almost as if people don't actually know what they like. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's one of those where, as an artist, I think it's important to kind of just have a style in which that represents you, and almost run with that. And I feel that's what sets us apart.
I like this idea of people actually don't really know what they want, so you might as well just propose something new, as opposed to assuming that whatever is popular is what's best. For you, Hanna, have you seen the idea of desirability shift between, let's say, the 2000s and 2020s, the last 2 decades?
Yeah, I think... In
fashion?
I think that desirability, what's desired is moved much quicker now. It's
Definitely.
It's a purple tank top. No, it's whatever, green leggings, I don't know. Partially because of the way things are dropped rather than in season and are available so much quicker. I think people want to consume things, or it's suggested to them by the algorithm that they should consume things much quicker. When I was a young writer, desirability was something that you lusted after, and you would see something in a show and it wasn't available for 6 months. So you had to really know if you wanted it, or try and replicate it, or find something similar or make it up.
I agree. People would create looks to go clubbing, and it could borrow from the runway, it could borrow from a magazine editorial in the face.
Yeah, and you'd be I saw this cool shoot in
that.
the face with these tights that aren't out,
Exactly.
These Gareth Pugh leggings,
Exactly.
and I found a pair in some random shop, and I'm going to put them on my head. It was much more. You were there, you would go out to please no one other than yourself, and as a form of self-expression.
That's another excellent point, the idea of pleasing yourself before pleasing anybody else, and the fact that, people are under a different kind of pressure now because of your visibility through, your social media. A 20-year-old is under different pressures than being 20 in the 90s or the 2000s, pre-social media. People dressed to kind of please themselves a bit more than their own digital image. I mean, people look slightly better than how I remember it, but it's, there's a lot more good taste, but not so interesting. So people are not as quirky. People are not as, self-expressing.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy an outfit and it's in your hand in less than 24 hours. Yeah. But when my generation of people would go out in the early noughties, the early 2000s, you would have to spend 4 days thinking about what you were going to wear and find those things. Yeah. And you didn't have a digital profile. So it kind of didn't matter if you looked like a complete lunatic.
I think probably streetwear crossing into high fashion is interesting too in a way, because maybe people felt a bit more at ease to dress more casually, even if maybe the price point of what you were buying might be higher. Yeah. You also maybe wearing jeans and a t-shirt at some point now is all right, if that's what you're into, or brands Palace, Supreme, etc., collaborating with really high-end fashion brands, but also retaining their vision and their kind of creative identity or their aesthetic. There's way more options for people, I think. There's so many more brands now.
That's true. And also the meaning of collaboration is so wonderfully loose. It can be two brands bringing their artistic vision together, or it can just be somebody putting their name on a t-shirt. It is such a sort of weird and fabulous idea that anything is possible. Yeah,
it ranges from a marketing exercise to a full-blown business to just a very short drop, month-long. I mean, collaborations is just a very broad.
It's such an umbrella term.
Yeah, it is.
But also it's nice because in a way, most creative things are a collaboration. Anything that I've ever written, somebody else has edited it and helped move their thoughts along. Yeah. I'm sure with photography that you have a stylist and a hair person and it's you're all bringing part of your vision, and certainly with creative direction.
The best work that I've ever done has been a collaboration, for sure. Working as part of a team and understanding different people's vision and strength and trying to bring that together and create something new from a collective vision is really important. It's a way to try and create new work now.
Yeah, and I think, music is the original collaboration, isn't it? So it's nice, I think, in this time that we live in, that collaboration is something that's so celebrated and desired.
It's allowed people to rethink the idea of the different segments of fashion, which is what you're talking about with Palace and high-end brands, because it was very rigid before. It was kind of evening wear, day wear, suits, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it wasn't that much range. Then all of a sudden you introduce streetwear onto the catwalk, and then you introduce the idea of collaborations. And it's a lot wider when you look at the fashion landscape now, especially with menswear. This new generation of fashion consumers, creatives, etc., especially with menswear, have really broadened the idea of what menswear is.
But going back to desirability, I've always thought there's sort of a disconnect between what's desirable on social media versus what are people actually wearing. Because I see a lot of the time, something becomes big on social media, everyone's talking about it, everyone says, oh, I want this, but when you actually see what reflects on the street, and that's something that Y3 has, I actually see a lot of people wearing Y3 on the street, and I know that was one of Yoji's whole points of creating Y3. Yeah. A lot of brands, they can make viral things on social media, but it doesn't necessarily translate to what people wear. So we have to ask the question, what is desirability? Is it just people liking things on social media, or is it what people are actually consuming, actually wearing on the street?
I think it's Hanna who made the point that, we don't have this, or maybe it's you, Jamie, we don't have the pyramid system of saying the editor at the top with the magazines talking down on, the general public. Now it's everybody, we interact with each other online, and there's multiple opinions. So, the gatekeepers are there, but it's not the same power because it's been, democratized, let's put it this way. So it's more of a horizontal kind of interaction. But then out of that, you get a sense that, okay, 3 big brands are very popular on social media, and it gives this feeling that, is that all that people want? Do we all want the same 3 brands which have managed to kind of grab everybody's attention? Or is there something else happening that needs to be highlighted on the street, which is the point that you make of, maybe we need to look to the streets to actually get a real sense of how do people look?
Depends on who you follow or who your echo chamber is.
Yeah.
Because
echo chamber.
What brands are big on my social media might be different to what brands are big on any of yours.
Because Y3 is turning 20, I wanted to know just a little bit about yourself. What were you doing in your 20s?
In my 20s, I was a basketball player.
Okay.
And that was kind of the time when I was resonating with Y3 because I wanted something stylish, but also I could wear, and it was comfortable to wear as a basketball player, just like walking around.
Okay.
And to wear over jerseys and stuff. So yeah, that was me in my 20s, just a basketball player interested in fashion.
Okay. And you, Hanna, your 20s?
I, funnily enough, wasn't a basketball player. In my 20s, well, they were just so recently, of course, just 6 months ago. Did I leave my 20s? No, I was 20 a long time ago. And it was a dark and messy era of the indie sleaze time. So we had a lot of fun, and thankfully it wasn't documented on social media.
That's great. There's something to be said about that. The freedom of not being mediatized, of not having a digital presence.
There might be a few pictures on a laptop that doesn't have a charger anymore. But,
exactly, that's good.
And maybe
that's
they
really
long
good.
remain there.
Maybe that will come back. Maybe that's the future. The zero presence online. Not to have so much digital presence. And for you, what was your 20s like?
I'm 23.
You're living it.
Okay, you're living then.
I'm living it right now.
That's good.
I see it as a time for me to kind of just be fearless and almost just push the narratives and tell the stories that I want to tell. It's interesting, especially working with brands. I'm essentially the target audience, and to be working on things and also be the target audience allows you to approach things from a different point of view. For me, it's almost just pushing, and hopefully there's more of a community that just are very opinionated and push the stories that they want to tell, because I feel like we're almost a generation that are going to change things, and I feel like there's more kind of leaders around my age group, and it's more time to kind of set foundations.
That's great. I mean, it's an excellent point. The fact that being both producing the kind of images that you want to see and being the target audience is a fantastic kind of position to be in. Where before things were a bit more rigid, where let's say someone would have had to go through such a process because of gatekeepers in that sense, to be able to work on certain campaigns, which is both something amazing, but at the same time, like you say, it's a responsibility to kind of be the voice of a generation, if that makes any sense. For you, Jamie, what was 20 like for you?
Would have been just kind of understanding where I might, fit in, or try and find something to sort of make. I was learning, working, trying to kind of get involved in as many different areas of what I thought could be the kind of end goal, I suppose. Okay. I spent a long time working in editorial and magazines, first at Pop and then Arena One Plus and then at Dazed. So I guess I was also very much about meeting a lot of people, as in trying to kind of meet photographers or people from my generation that I kind of resonate with, that I sort of feel maybe we share some kind of collective aesthetic or some kind of ideas, I suppose.
Have you grown with them? Do you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's like the best thing about it. Like I remember when I got jobs like really young, when I didn't know what I was doing, or I was trying to figure things out, and you'd like get your friends involved that were very much of the same thing. But together, you make something work, and like that always happens. That's timeless. It's not just I wasn't the generation to do that. That's going to happen forever. And I'm a big kind of like supporter of like working generationally, I think.
Yeah, which is I think is one of the strengths here in London is the fact that at almost each generation of creatives kind of brings a new chapter and a new idea of youth culture, because I think London dominates in terms of print magazines, platforms, etc. It's one of the best places if you're interested in image making, youth culture. And people producing work, and this idea of generational community is really brilliant. Well, maybe I should conclude with my 20s. My 20s were my entry into fashion, and I went into design, similarly to Jamie, just trying to find where I fit in. I worked with pattern making and designing, and that gave me a lot of respect when it comes to the craft of starting a brand and building something. And building a fashion brand for 20 years is a lot of work because it's probably one of the more abstract and unstable form of business. You have to reinvent yourself every 6 months for a designer. So the idea of being relevant is with every collection. You kind of have to bring something that keeps you relevant. You are being questioned every 6 months, basically, as creatives, in all your line of work. It's not, a lawyer becomes good and they can ride on, to some extent, on your experience. Obviously, each case is different, but it's like a doctor with experience gets better. With fashion design or the kind of this realm of creativity, every 6 months, or every campaign that you shoot, every new project is your work is on the line, and you have to keep moving and reinventing yourself. So thank you for joining me on this, and to the audience on this panel for Y3, and happy anniversary for Y3 and Adidas.